Vulcan failed in the blink of an eye. Before he could realize what was happening, he was defeated by Roman with a precise and overwhelming strike. At that moment, all eyes turned to Roman. It was when people truly realized what was standing before them. The true power of Roman, far beyond all speculation, beyond every limit they had ever known. However, many still held on to hope. They believed that as the matches continued, and time passed, Roman would exhaust his energy, making him gradually more vulnerable to defeat. An hour had passed since the second test began. The sound of swords slicing through the air roared fiercely, proving the intensity of the relentless battle. That was the 60th match, and before Roman, another challenger fell, unable to last even a minute. At the same time, it was also the 60th consecutive defeat for those who challenged him. Roman remained unshaken, coldly uttering, "Next." Despite going through numerous battles, Roman showed no signs of weakening. Among hundreds of tense gazes, one person finally understood why Roman declared that from the start. For him, if anyone could pass this challenge and become his knight, they would no longer be weak. They would live as predators at the top of the food chain, never prey. A man looked up at the arena, a strange belief swelling in his heart that Roman's words would eventually come true. Although a feeling of respect arose, people still could not dismiss the old reputation. Roman Dmitri was still seen as a fool. But for some clearer-minded individuals, this was a golden opportunity, a rare chance to break free from fate. They not only wanted to become Roman's subordinates, but also longed to be his people, to fight under the command of a strong leader. However, fear grew stronger. In the gloomy purple light and under the pressure of Roman's aura, everyone wondered how they could face this monster. Amid the suffocating atmosphere, a voice from the judges warned, if no one dared to step forward, all would be disqualified. While everyone hesitated, a calm voice rose. Someone confidently stepped forward, breaking the heavy atmosphere. Lucas appeared in the arena, sword in hand and determined eyes, carrying the resolve to face Roman. He raised his head high, introduced himself briefly but decisively. "I am Lucas, candidate number 61. Against the blue sky and the towering castle backdrop, Lucas maintained a sharp gaze. In his heart, he admitted, he is a real monster. Facing Roman Dmitri, who was radiating murderous intent, Lucas could not suppress his fear. In his eyes, Roman was truly a monster. Not just raw power, Roman's aura alone was enough to overwhelm his opponent, making them feel crushed by an invisible pressure. Lucas silently realized that Roman was now completely different from the faint figure in his memory. He was no longer wasting his life, but truly stepping onto the path to conquer the continent. Roman stood tall on the battlefield, his determined gaze declaring ambition. Lucas had a clear premonition. This man could truly dominate the entire continent. Lucas drew his sword, disregarding rewards or original goals. The only thing he wanted was to verify for himself whether Roman had truly transformed as rumored. A flip sound echoed as the hourglass was turned upside down, marking the start of the life-or-death match. "Begin," the command rang out. All eyes focused on the falling grains in the hourglass. Time had been activated. Lucas dashed like lightning, his whole body exerting full speed. In his mind, there was only one goal, to pass this test. Observers could not hide their surprise. Lucas did not hesitate to charge straight into battle, one of the few daring to strike first and choosing a distinctly different attack method. Lucas swung his sword straight at Roman's head, a fierce and cunning strike. Clearly, he had no intention of holding back. The two swords clashed with a sharp clack, creating an explosion of light in the arena. Both Roman Dmitri and Lucas put all their strength into the first strike, showing their determination not to back down. Roman quickly stepped back, dodging the opponent's deadly dagger strike. Meanwhile, he seized the opportunity to counterattack precisely with his sword. Not willing to be outdone, Lucas gritted his teeth and launched another fierce counterattack, swinging his sword powerfully toward Roman, refusing to lose the initiative. Roman remained calm as usual, raising his sword to block the strike. His eyes were sharp and cold, his movements decisive and unshaken before the relentless assault. With superior speed and technique, Roman easily defended against both attacks simultaneously from Lucas's sword and dagger, knocking his opponent far away. Without giving Lucas time to recover, Roman immediately surged forward like a whirlwind, attacking with overwhelming force, pushing back his opponent with a series of precise and fierce moves. Lucas struggled to stand amid the dust after the devastating blow, silently admitting that those strikes were still not enough to shake Roman. He realized this opponent was like an impregnable steel fortress. Despite being overwhelmed, Lucas did not allow himself to stop. He drew his dagger, determined not to falter even for a moment, knowing that a single lapse would mean total defeat. Reason told him to seize the initiative. Lucas braced himself and charged forward, putting all his strength into a new attack, refusing to fall into a passive position again. From afar, a figure watching the match smiled and whispered Lucas's name. In this person's eyes, Lucas was not only tough but also skillful, a pretty decent warrior. Roman silently assessed his opponent. He admitted this fighting style was unsuitable for real battlefields but perfect for a training match. In his violet flashing eyes, he saw that Lucas possessed a rare fighting instinct. However, Roman had no intention of letting Lucas hold out for more than a minute. With a light, deadly step, he shifted to the offensive, initiating the decisive attack. The two swords clashed fiercely again. Roman emphasized that the test lasted exactly 1 minute, enough to engrave in the students' minds the gap in strength. Lucas surged forward to counterattack, delivering a powerful slash. However, Roman calmly dodged without losing vigilance. Immediately, Roman responded with a decisive sword strike. In his mind, he wanted everyone to realize how strong the future leader was. "End it," Roman decided to deliver the finishing blow, his face showing clear determination not to let Lucas stand any longer. Lucas froze as he felt the rising murderous intent. His wide-open eyes showed extreme surprise as the attack was about to land. Roman charged like a whirlwind. His swordsmanship was so powerful and precise that Lucas could not defend in time, swept away by the overwhelming assault. The blow was so strong it sent Lucas flying into the air. Everything turned white, as if his consciousness was fading away in free fall. In the silent darkness, Lucas began to reflect. He understood clearly that no matter how hard he tried without using magic power, he would remain stuck at rank B. To surpass that, overwhelming strength was essential. On the blood-soaked battlefield, a silver-haired man stood among bloody corpses, beside a blazing red sword. The foundation of power, as he understood, was the ability to use magic power. In the darkness of the forest, a blue-haired soldier knelt exhausted. He understood his limits. No matter how hard he tried, he would only remain a rank B mercenary. But even knowing those limits clearly, in his mind echoed resistance. A fierce emotion arose, not willing to give up. On the dead land filled with broken swords and corpses, he stood amidst a sea of fire and blood. Even without magic power, he survived time and again. And in those moments of survival, he grasped the most important truth: to live, to win, one must do whatever it takes to achieve it. That ideal burned within him like a fist thrown with full force, breaking through all limits. The unexpected strike closed in on the opponent with an unstoppable will. The silver-haired man remained calm, dust light shimmering on his face. Faced with such resilience, he could not help but take notice. A comrade was astonished witnessing the reckless act. The blue-haired soldier had thrown sand to blind the vision. He recalled they were only required to endure for 1 minute. On the training battlefield, the silver-haired soldier quietly observed as the opponent was knocked away. No rules were broken, only strength decided the outcome. The survivor is not the strongest, but the one who acts without hesitation. In the storm of battle, the blue-haired soldier gave his all in attack. A young warrior charged in fury, shouting "Hyaa" as he launched the decisive strike. His eyes full of hatred, he gripped his weapon tightly, pouring all his strength into the final attack. The opponent's eyes widened in shock. He did not expect such a reckless attack in such a disadvantageous situation. A faint cloud of dust covered the battlefield. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed as the blue-haired warrior approached his target, determined not to retreat. At that moment, a dazzling light flashed in the eyes of a female mage. The sudden event stunned her, leaving her momentarily speechless. Through the dust-blurred vision, she still clearly saw the man's figure, his eyes red from the sand, yet never leaving the target, staring straight at her as if nothing obscured his sight. The long-haired warrior let out a soft laugh, starting as heavy breathing, then turning into a dry chuckle, as if bitterly accepting defeat but fully resigned. His sword slipped from his hand, falling to the ground with a resounding clang, declaring the end of the battle. He stood silently in the drifting snow, eyes lowered, voice low, as he firmly spoke 2 words: "I surrender." He officially admitted defeat. In the blood-soaked night, the demonic cult is known as a place of brutal training. Even before learning martial arts, disciples here must grasp a fundamental survival principle. That principle is the ability to not feel one's own eyes, a forced numbness, serving as a warning of the harsh fate that lies ahead. In battle, even a single blink can erase the line between life and death. No mistakes are allowed in this world. Like controlling breath to circulate inner energy, disciples must also learn to calculate every blink, an inhuman but mandatory discipline. To achieve this, learners must surpass their limits, suppress instincts, even endure pain to the point of tears because they cannot close their eyes. Because all are trained never to feel their own eyes, no matter what happens, an absolute command from the heretical doctrine. A white-haired child faces the trainer's knife. That moment is no longer teaching. It is a life-or-death test to engrave this cruel rule. The sharp blade swings down, a streak of blood tearing through the darkness. No hesitation, no diverted glance, only cold brutality and absolute obedience. The boy keeps his eyes wide open, staring straight at the blade near his face. Despite fear and pain, those eyes do not blink, for he has engraved in his heart, "Never close your eyes, not even once." Finally, in the dim light, the purple eyes flicker. It is a sign of passing, of a disciple successfully trained, now truly a living weapon. The gray-haired man finally bows his head in defeat, speaking with bitterness. "I surrender." Bitterness is clear in his eyes and clenched hands. Under the clear sky, the murmurs of the crowd echo throughout the fortress grounds, reflecting astonishment at the recent unexpected events. A servant hurriedly hands a water pouch to the armored commander, politely offering, "Water, sir." The other hand quickly takes it. The commander splashes the water pouch on his face to wake up, while the defeated man stands silently afar, light shining on his body as if exposing his shame. The blue-haired young man grits his teeth, blaming himself inwardly. "If I had known this outcome, I wouldn't have used sand." He clenches his fist in regret. Although he achieved the goal of passing the test, he still feels his victory is a disgrace. Every action was just to survive that moment. In the loser's mind is a series of confused thoughts. He blames himself, thinking he disappointed the trainer and fears punishment. Before he can finish thinking, a cold voice sounds, "Next!" No reproach, not even a glance. Both are stunned. The victorious young man, once extremely anxious, now stands dumbfounded at the commander's indifferent reaction. His eyes are full of doubt and confusion. From the crowd, someone whispers in amazement, "He's not even angry." The commander's silence unsettles even the audience. The crowd is stunned by the commander's calm response. One person cannot hide his confusion, wondering why he doesn't question the trick Lucas used. The commander turns his back and walks away, leaving no reproach or judgment, letting silence envelop the training ground. In his thoughts, the commander reveals that he had long known Lucas's plan. During the attack, he noticed Lucas secretly taking something from his pocket. He deliberately did not avoid that trick because he wanted to observe Lucas's true ability. He does not know what trials Lucas has endured, nor how many bloody battles he has experienced. However, he is certain of one thing. During his life as Jung Hyuk-beek, he witnessed countless scenes of bloodshed, so many that they could form an entire ocean. It was thanks to that sea of blood that he became the demon god and conquered all of Murim. Amidst the hellish red scene, he spoke coldly. "Anyone else want to join?" The hourglass kept flowing, marking each second in the tense air as no one dared to step forward. Another contestant rushed forward at a terrifying speed, launching a fierce full-force attack at the silver-armored opponent, hoping to quickly defeat him before being countered. At the decisive moment, the contestant quickly pulled a stone from his pocket, intending to use a surprise trick to turn the tide. Without hesitation, he threw the stone with great force, aiming directly at the opponent in an effort to distract and find a chance to survive. Meanwhile, an observer noticed the impact of Lucas's action. He had become a model for other candidates, forcing them to use every trick to survive a minute of combat. Immediately after, another contestant hurriedly charged like lightning, no longer caring about strategy or honor, driven only by survival instinct. But before he could act, he was struck by a devastating kick to the face, shattering all his plans in an instant. Lucas watched coldly, asserting that using tricks did not mean disqualification, but if one crossed the line, they would have to bet their entire fate. Another candidate screamed in pain, clutching his face after the attack. Meanwhile, the operator calmly declared, "Next." A lucky survivor sighed in relief, telling himself that if he hadn't surrendered in time, he might have shared the same fate. But above all, he began to realize the strangeness of the match. Everything was happening too illogically and confusingly. Despite having fought exactly 100 battles over 2 hours, the armored warrior showed no sign of fatigue. His gaze was sharp and cold, not a drop of sweat, as if this was just a warm-up. On the blood-stained battlefield, he had learned to fight to survive. There, fatigue was a meaningless excuse. A single slip meant death. To survive, he learned to control his breath, inhale deeply, then exhale gently, keeping his body alert amid danger. Thanks to that technique, he absorbed mana from the air with each breath, helping energy circulate evenly throughout his body. His body grew stronger by adapting to this process. Thanks to healing abilities, he fully recovered after each battle. With the sword in hand, he continued fighting without hesitation, each strike precise and powerful. He recalled the time he conquered the martial world, fighting non-stop for 3 days and nights. With that experience, these ordinary battles were not enough to tire him or shake his will. Under the clear blue sky, a command sounded summoning all remaining contestants. The contest operator stepped forward and began announcing the results of the second test. His cold voice echoed in the silence. "None of you passed the second test." Although no one passed the test, the judge left open the opportunity, declaring that 30 people would be selected from 120 candidates to continue to the next round. After announcing the end, he declared the test concluded, allowing all contestants to leave and rest, creating a relieved atmosphere after the tension. Night fell, moonlight shone through the window frame, casting a dim light on the green grass, marking the start of the secret selection phase. Roman stepped forward with the list of 30 selected people, handing it to the training supervisor and ordering. From now on, he would be responsible for training these individuals. Receiving the order respectfully, the supervisor immediately replied, "Yes, sir," showing absolute obedience to Roman. However, upon looking at the list, he froze. His eyes clearly showed doubt when seeing the names of those selected. He began analyzing each name. Vulcan was the first to stand out. His courage must have impressed Roman, but Henderson was too ordinary to make the list. Just as he was about to conclude that the choices were reasonable, he suddenly froze, a wave of confusion rising when he saw another name appear. Unable to hide his surprise, he approached Roman and asked frankly, "Sir Roman, Lucas was also selected," receiving a definite confirmation. Although acknowledging Lucas as a talented B-rank mercenary, he still harbored doubts, especially when mentioning that Lucas had used unfair tricks during the test. Chris continued to express suspicion about Lucas, emphasizing that he had given up halfway when he felt he was about to lose, considering that an act of cowardice. He concluded that people like Lucas were burdens on the battlefield because they lacked resilience when facing defeat. Chris believed Lucas was a mediocre mercenary, willing to abandon honor and comrades to save his own life, not someone who should be chosen. However, contrary to that view, Roman calmly replied that it was precisely for that reason he chose Lucas, leaving Chris astonished. Chris confusedly asked Roman's meaning, not understanding why someone like Lucas, whom he thought cowardly, was valued. Roman explained that among all the candidates, only Lucas dared to use practical tricks to defeat him, while no one else even considered it. Roman believed that people like Lucas, pragmatic and willing to do whatever it takes to survive, truly shine on the battlefield because they always find a way to live. Roman reversed the question, asking Chris if he was sure Lucas was willing to betray his comrades just because he used tricks in a test. A memory surfaced of a teacher who once told Chris, "Sword skills or abilities do not guarantee survival. Only those who face reality with clear minds truly survive." The teacher warned Chris to always remember that even the strongest knight has silent enemies waiting for their chance, a caution against arrogance and carelessness. Chris silently blamed himself for acting thoughtlessly once again. In his dark eyes, he realized he had never truly looked far ahead. Standing before his desk, Chris was still troubled. He hesitated before asking one last question, as there was still something he could not understand. He clearly voiced his doubt. If the battle was 5 months away, and nobles were usually not sent to the front lines, then why had the Lord already begun recruiting more knights? To that question, the Lord calmly replied that perhaps the official announcement was being made at that very moment. As he said, the Barco family had issued an official document. They condemned Lawrence for breaking promises and betraying trust, declaring they would no longer wait and would resolve matters by force. Elsewhere, nobles gathered at a wine party, asserting that Lawrence had committed a serious offense by failing to repay the ancestral debt left behind. Not only breaking promises, they were also accused of arrogance for refusing to hand over the land once used as collateral, causing the entire council to fall into tense disputes. This message was sent to all citizens of the Cairo Kingdom as a public warning before military action was taken. The declaration stated, if within a week Lawrence did not repay the debt or hand over the land, Barco had permission from the central government to initiate war. Chris shouted in panic, unable to fully grasp the situation, but the Lord calmly confirmed, from this moment on, everything would change completely. In a brightly lit room, a mysterious silver-haired man coldly declared that they were preparing to intervene in the war between Barco and Lawrence. His sharp words made the two nobles sitting opposite fall silent, aware of the dangerous undercurrent just rising. Roman Dmitri stood before Flora, decisively severing all ties between them. With a cold and resolute tone, he asserted that the two of them were strangers and demanded that she not interfere in his personal affairs. His words clearly demonstrated his independence and determination to protect his honor in his own way. While Flora still hadn't fully grasped the reason, Roman continued to reveal a serious truth. The Barco family had borrowed a huge sum from the Golden Royal Bank. He raised a question that heightened the tension, signaling that behind this loan was the looming threat of war. Roman explained that, in reality, it was the Lawrence territory that needed this marriage, not the Dmitri family. Frankly, he expressed that he didn't care how the world judged Roman Dmitri, but only wanted to be with someone who could judge from real experience, not prejudice. For that reason, he emphasized his desire to cancel the engagement. Roman's declaration was like a sharp blade cutting deep into Flora's heart. She quietly blamed herself, believing she had ruined everything, damaged the honor and position of the Lawrence family because of her own weakness and mistakes in behavior. Torment crept into Flora's mind even in her sleep. She woke up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, startled as if she had just dreamed a nightmare created by the consequences of her own actions. Dim light filtered through the thick curtains in the quiet, dark room. The silence was so profound that only Flora's rapid breathing could be heard, signaling a sleepless and anxious night. The luxurious but cold room had now become a prison for Flora's troubled emotions. She still couldn't calm down after what happened in Dimitri, her heart squeezed by regret and helplessness. Flora sat dazed by the bed, her hand on her forehead in pain and worry. She whispered a tormented question. "What have I done?" Regret had seeped deep into her soul as she began to realize the heavy consequences of her previous decisions and attitude. The scene shifted to daytime, in front of the magnificent mansion, where the question of breaking off the engagement was raised again. This event was not just a rumor among the nobility, but was also sparking waves of gossip throughout Lawrence. Two servants stood outside Flora's room, whispering to each other. One revealed that Flora had locked herself in her room since returning from Dimitri. They speculated that it was Flora who caused the engagement to fall apart, unable to understand why someone considered as thick-headed as Roman would decide to leave her first. Outside Flora's door, the servants continued to whisper about the uncertain future of the territory. They worried whether they would keep their jobs after the broken engagement, as rumors of war between Lawrence and Barco were spreading more and more. Meanwhile, Flora sat quietly in her room, faintly hearing the gossip from outside. She knew that her father's reaction, the Lord of Lawrence, had plunged the entire castle into anxiety. That only made her feel more pressure. In the quiet night, Flora silently admitted her own arrogance. She once thought she was a smart, understanding woman, but now she felt like the most foolish of all. Memories of her glorious graduation resurfaced. Flora had once been an outstanding student, completing advanced studies with excellent results, which always made her believe in her own abilities and excellence. The recollection continued with the image of her father, Viscount Lawrence, always smiling proudly whenever he looked at his daughter. Flora once thought she was his pride, the perfect child, but now she admitted that without the title Lady Lawrence, she was nothing at all. Flora's mind was encapsulated in a haunting symbolic image, herself as a flower imprisoned in a greenhouse, always sheltered and protected, never having faced the harsh realities outside, a fragile and useless existence. The sarcastic remarks once directed at Roman have now become something Flora cannot accept. She realizes the truly incompetent one is not Roman, but herself, the one who failed to see his true nature. Flora's mind is now filled only with shame and regret. She no longer dares to face her father, the one who has always placed trust and expectations in her. To her now, his disappointed gaze is more cruel than any reproach. In her contemplation, Flora poses a troubled question. If it were Roman in this situation, what would he do? It is no longer a comparison, but a cry for help, seeking a way out from the model she once underestimated. Flora gradually realizes the contrast between herself and Roman. While she was expected and nurtured with full glory, Roman grew up under the shadow of contempt. No one expected anything from him, and that very thing became the strength that helped him transform. Roman Dimitri, alone amidst the corpses of the Blood Fangs organization, stood tall like an invincible warrior. Without anyone's help, he defeated them all by his own strength, a brave act demonstrating his determination to protect the honor of the Dimitri family. From the gloomy room, Flora sat silently questioning herself. She could not believe that Roman could accomplish such a miracle on his own. Questions flooded her mind. Since when did he become so strong, and how did he dare to act so decisively? But then, Flora dismissed those meaningless questions. What mattered was not whether Roman could or could not do it, but that he dared to think and dared to act. He did not wait for anyone's approval or favor, but acted for ideals and his family. Compared to Roman, Flora now felt very small. The surge of inferiority made her clench her fists in anger directed at herself. The difference between them was not in status, but in inner strength and courage. Outside the room, the servants continued their daily duties. One gently knocked on the door, announcing that food had been brought to Flora, but unaware that inside, she was undergoing a profound internal change. A heavy atmosphere enveloped the hallway. Two servants exchanged confused glances. The silence coming from the ladies' room made them worried and curious about the condition inside. Suddenly the door swung open. A soft but decisive swing echoed. The servant was stunned by the scene before him, as it was the first time Flora had appeared since returning from Dimitri. Before the surprised servant's eyes, Flora showed no sign of hesitation. She looked straight ahead, her gaze sharper than before, not a weak lady anymore, but a woman who had just undergone upheaval and had reshaped her own path. With a calm but firm voice, Flora declared, "I will go to the library." A simple sentence but carrying great meaning. She was ready to step out of the darkness and begin seeking her own way, no longer waiting for others to decide for her. From the library, Flora observed her father's desperate efforts to seek support from other families. This truth made her realize she could no longer sit and wait. She must also fight for the future of the Lawrence family with her own knowledge and actions. Flora carefully flipped through each page of the book, her eyes serious. She clearly understood that in the current situation, no family was willing to help them. The collapse of House Lawrence had completely drained outside trust. The image of Roman appeared in Flora's mind, resiliently confronting the blood fangs with only his own strength. She realized that, like him, they must find their own way to face difficulties and cannot rely on rescue from anyone else. Under the bright blue sky filled with sunlight, a servant hurriedly called out, "Sir!" The peaceful atmosphere outside sharply contrasted with the crisis weighing heavily inside the mansion of House Lawrence. Another bad news arrived. House Martell had rejected the cooperation proposal. Wasting no time, the powerful man in the room immediately ordered, "Contact House Bastra next." Hope was once again extinguished. House Bastra also refused, even though they had eagerly wanted to expand their distribution network. Even when offered a dream opportunity, they chose to withdraw because they did not want to get involved in this matter. The head of House Lawrence clenched his fist, turning another page of the book in despair. He seemed to be searching for another viable solution among the many doors that had been slammed shut. A panic-stricken retainer reported, "Sir, the situation is very serious." He emphasized that, under pressure from House Barco, almost no family dared to help House Lawrence at this time. The crisis became increasingly apparent. News spread quickly. House Barco had sworn to take revenge on any family in the northeast region that dared to intervene. Fear spread like an uncontrollable fire. Although knowing all doors were closing, the head still relentlessly sought solutions. Another page was turned, his eyes resolute amid the surrounding storm. The situation worsened as rumors of House Barco's revenge spread. Other families began to hesitate, unwilling to become targets in the power struggle, further isolating House Lawrence completely. A messenger appeared with a serious expression, declaring a terrifying ultimatum. If within 1 week Lawrence could not repay the debt or hand over the mortgaged land, they would face war. More frighteningly, House Barco had been officially authorized by the central government to launch war over that land. A heavy sound echoed as Flora slammed the book down on the table. She was no longer just reading, she had begun to act. In her eyes, there was no longer confusion but clear determination. Sitting in the quiet, candle-lit library, Flora immersed herself in a sea of knowledge, surrounded by stacks of books on politics, strategy, and history. She was searching for a solution among the lines of text, each page a fragile hope for the endangered land. Sighing in despair, Flora rested her head in her hands, keenly feeling the weight of time. Only 1 week remained before war broke out, and every passing hour seemed to squeeze the hope of saving Lawrence. In Flora's mind, strategic analyses gradually took shape. Amid mounting pressure and dwindling time, she wondered what the best plan was to save her homeland from the scourge of war. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, a burst of anger erupted. The Lord of Lawrence slammed his fist on the table, furious at the betrayal of nobles once close, now turning their backs when his house was in danger. The Lord continued to vent his anger with pain. He recalled the days when other families flattered and tried to win his favor. But now, at the moment of greatest need, they coldly abandoned Lawrence as if no connection had ever existed. Amid the tension, he inquired about progress from the Golden Bank, their last hope, but the answer disappointed him. The bank needed more time to review the loan, more than the time Lawrence had left. The reason was clear and bitter. Golden Bank had invested too much in House Barco, and siding with them obviously promised greater profits. Despite exhausting all connections, every door slammed shut before him. Sitting at the head of the meeting table, surrounded by heavy gazes and suffocating silence, the Lord of Lawrence wondered, have we truly reached a dead end? In that space, hope seemed to have run dry. In the tense atmosphere of the council room, an elderly gentleman boldly suggested, surrender might be the wisest choice at this time. Though hard to hear, these words echoed the harsh reality that House Lawrence was facing. Council members took turns listing mounting difficulties. Resources completely cut off, clearly inferior military strength. They argued that partial concession might be the only way to preserve soldiers' lives and retain some remaining land. Silence spread throughout the room as the members bowed their heads one by one, showing their frustration and helplessness. No one objected, but their eyes were filled with resentment and fear of loss. A gloomy look lingered on each face, confusion, doubt, and torment over the choice ahead. The atmosphere became so heavy that all thoughts seemed to freeze. The head of the family, sitting in the dim light of the late afternoon, bowed motionless. The immense pressure weighed on his shoulders, forcing him to consider honor, responsibility, and harsh reality. After a moment of silence, the Lord admitted part of his subordinate's reasoning. Before he could finish speaking, a knock on the door broke the heavy silence that enveloped the room. A servant entered to announce Miss Flora wished to see him. Hearing that name, the Lord could not hide his surprise. In this chaotic situation, he did not expect his own daughter to take the initiative to appear. Just as he was about to refuse, saying he was busy and would meet later, the door suddenly swung wide open. Flora stepped in, her gaze resolute, her expression determined as if she was ready to face everything. Flora's decisive appearance silenced the entire hall. The calmness in her every step drew all eyes to her, bringing new hope amid the atmosphere of despair. Standing before her father, Flora did not beat around the bush. With a firm gaze and strong voice, she clearly stated her purpose. "Father, I need to talk to you." Everything was now about to change with her steps. In response to the unexpected declaration, a voice rang out full of confusion and anger. "What did you just say?" But what followed was Roman Dimitri's unwavering determination. Without hesitation, he confirmed, "I have made it clear." Roman Dimitri, sitting upright in his family's great hall, did not back down from the consequences. He declared strongly, "In the war between Barco and Lawrence, I, Roman Dimitri, will join the fight." Faced with his son's determination, his father could not hide his worry. He asked with a loaded tone, "Do you know what that means?" Ignoring his father's suspicious look, Roman still did not retreat. His father, in a moment of anger, slammed a teacup on the table and shouted, "Are you still stubbornly doing this foolish thing? The war has been approved by the central government. It is legal." With an angry face, he continued yelling that breaking the engagement with Flora had severed all ties between the two families. If House Dimitri intervened, they could be completely isolated or even face military intervention from the central government. The father continued to criticize his son, suspecting that Roman was acting impulsively out of sympathy for Lawrence. He said disappointedly, "I can't believe it. I thought you had grown up." As tension rose, Roman asked his father an important question. "How do you want me to live my life in the future?" But his father only shouted, "What does that mean?" Roman calmly replied, affirming that his decision was not based on momentary emotions. He recounted that he had once been threatened by Anthony Barco because of the marriage alliance, and although there was no evidence, it made him clearly realize the true ambition of House Barco. In that moment, memories surfaced. Everyone said House Dimitri was the greatest power in the Northeast, but Roman understood that such respect was now only superficial. Roman looked straight at his father without avoidance. He clearly said, "Barco has long despised us. Even though you have power and wealth, you have done nothing, perhaps, because you are too satisfied with the present." Amid the tense atmosphere and his father's opposition, Roman Dimitri showed a resolute, cold gaze. With sharp eyes radiating unshakable determination, he affirmed, "But I, Roman Dimitri, think differently." That was a declaration marking a complete break from the old and timid views of the nobility. That decisiveness continued to escalate. Roman did not hesitate to reveal his own thirst for power. He bluntly declared that he would destroy anyone, including House Barco, if they stood in his way. It was not just a warning, it was a clear signal that Roman would not allow the Dimitri family's reputation to be tarnished again. Not relying on momentary emotions, Roman presented sharp reasoning for his decision. He exposed the true nature behind the reasons of those in power, that they were merely tactics to save face. If Barco could use excuses to ignite war, then he, with a righteous stance, also had every reason to respond. In a moment of deep introspection, Roman, or rather the reincarnated soul of Junghyuk-beek, recalled his past life. He admitted feeling lost in this new life, but affirmed the one thing that had not changed, the desire for domination. Being reborn was an opportunity, and this time he would not live to run away but to rise to the top. Without seeking help from the family, Roman declared that he would intervene as an individual, an independent man named Roman Dimitri. With eyes blazing with determination and absolute faith in his chosen path, he only asked his father to quietly observe, because from this moment on, he would prove himself through action and write his own destiny. Roman's father reminisced about his humble origins. Despite having power and wealth, he still saw himself as a commoner in the eyes of the nobility. His wife noticed that something had happened during the trip to the capital. She gently brought up the subject as he entered the room. He denied that anything was wrong, but his eyes and demeanor said it all. He clearly felt the contempt in the nobles' gazes. They did not regard him as an equal, which made him uncomfortable even though no one said anything. His wife looked at him with sympathy and softly asked if he wanted to change that. Romero Dimitri calmly affirmed that he was satisfied with his current life. He had no desire to seek recognition from the nobility nor to strain himself to win their favor. However, behind that contentment, Romero revealed a deep wish. He hoped his children would not be like him, would not live resigned within limited boundaries. He did not want his children to settle quietly in a small border territory. On the contrary, he longed for them to reach further, surpassing their given status. And at that moment, he watched Roman Dmitri, his eldest son, sitting before him with a resolute gaze and stronger determination than ever. Romero was stunned to realize the maturity shining in his son's eyes. Even if he wanted to stop him, he could not. Roman had embarked on his own path. Looking into those eyes, Romero clearly felt Roman was no longer the uncertain boy he once was, but a man who had found his direction in life. With trembling hands, he looked back at himself in that emotional moment. Yes, this was what he had silently hoped for, to see his son grow up confident and standing firm. In his heart, he told himself, the son he once worried about had truly matured. A new chapter for the Dmitri family was opening. With sincere emotion, Romero no longer stopped Roman. He accepted and was ready to support him if needed, like a father backing his son from behind. Finally, he proudly and firmly declared, "You, Roman Dmitri, are my son, and I, Romero Dmitri, am your father," a recognition both of kinship and a strong blessing. Roman Dmitri smiled softly, his eyes shining with determination. Despite bearing great responsibility, he calmly affirmed that he would never let himself be alone on the journey ahead. The sound of hammer striking anvil echoed everywhere. The Dmitri forge gate appeared majestic, depicting the symbol of a prosperous family tied to the craft of weapon forging. Roman approached quietly, gazing at the stone sign with images of an anvil and hammer. His footsteps echoed, blending with the metallic clangs. He confirmed this was exactly where he needed to be. Standing amid the bustling street, Roman sensed the immense scale of this place. Dmitri Forge, known as the largest forge in the Kingdom of Cairo, fully deserved its reputation. Inside the forge, blacksmiths worked tirelessly. The blazing furnace and ringing hammer proved this was a place capable of operating dozens of smiths simultaneously, the main livelihood of the Dmitri family. Not just one forge, the entire street was a specialized area for smithing. The sounds of hammers and clashing metal formed a symphony of prosperity and hard work. Roman was surprised to learn that more than 30 forges operated simultaneously on this street. The specialization and production scale far exceeded what he had imagined. Amidst the lively and bustling scene, Roman clearly understood why the Dmitri family could accumulate such vast wealth. Everything had a reason behind the prosperity. The ore mine behind the Dmitri lands was not only the largest in the kingdom, but also directly exploited by their own blacksmiths. The exquisite crafting techniques made the raw materials extremely valuable. With abundant resources and immense economic power, the nobles of the northeastern kingdom of Cairo, always wary of Dmitri, they clearly understood that opposing Dmitri meant putting themselves at a disadvantage. Dmitri was feared not only for its vast wealth, but also for its strategic military position. Any force losing the weapon supply forged by Dmitri would face existential threats in the heart of Cairo, where iron and steel were the backbone of power and influence. Under the vast sky, Roman quietly confirmed the place he had arrived at. Before him was a vital symbol of the Dmitri family, master blacksmiths who had built the reputation and authority of the entire territory with their fiery steel hands. In a conversation with his father, Roman clearly expressed his independent stance on dealing with the upcoming situation. However, to carry out his plan, he needed only one thing from him: to equip weapons and armor for the army under his command. Romero did not hesitate. He set down his teacup and decisively gave the order, "Seek out Hendrik." That was not just a name. Hendrik was the person the entire family could fully trust when it came to iron forging and weapon crafting. Romero recounted that he had once been the head blacksmith of the Dmitri Forge, directly managing everything until he was a noble. Since then, all responsibilities had been taken over by Hendrik, now regarded as the pillar of all the family's forging activities. Romero told Roman that just mentioning his name would surely make Hendrik assist with any request Roman made. Roman nodded, showing sincere gratitude to the father he now truly respected. "Thank you, father." However, Romero added an important reminder. The blacksmiths at Dmitri were very proud of their craft. They would not easily submit just because of the name Dmitri, but only accepted those who truly understood the forging art, the condition to earn their genuine trust. As Roman entered the forge area, stern eyes immediately turned toward him. The burly blacksmiths stopped their work and shifted their attention to the young nobleman, whom they still knew by a rather bad reputation. Roman continued walking through the work area amid unfriendly gazes. His footsteps echoed in an atmosphere full of caution and suspicion from the blacksmiths, making him increasingly aware of the pressure he faced. Looking around, Roman silently acknowledged that his father's words were completely accurate. The blacksmith's eyes were far from pleasant, and he clearly understood why. That was the consequence of the past he himself had created. Recalling his reckless and arrogant actions in the past, Roman admitted he could not blame others for their views of him. He accepted that to change how they treated him, he first had to change himself. At that moment, a voice rang out from above the wall. "Oh, look who's here." From above, someone spoke as if having long noticed Roman's arrival, signaling that the entire forge's attention was about to focus on him. From inside the forge, a large man with a thick gray beard stepped out with an experienced demeanor. That was Hendrik, the legendary master blacksmith, successor of the forge from Romero. His voice rang out strongly. "What brings you here?" Roman calmly faced the master blacksmith, his eyes sharp but full of determination. He quickly confirmed the identity of the man before him and confidently said, "Surely my father has told you why I came today." Hendrik did not beat around the bush, nodding in confirmation. "Ah, right. You need equipment for 30 soldiers, correct?" The statement affirmed he had been informed and was considering Roman's request with the deliberation of a seasoned blacksmith. Hendrik, with cold eyes and a suspicious tone, did not hesitate to sarcastically suggest that Roman had only returned because he had spent all his money on drinking and was now coming back to Dmitri Forge to find some easily sold goods to earn pocket money. Faced with the unexpected accusation, Roman did not react strongly but silently looked at his opponent, his eyes cold but not angry, making the atmosphere heavy and full of implication. Hendrik led Roman to a corner of the yard filled with piles of old, rusty iron armor, then casually told him he could choose any piece to use for his army, and that would be enough for 30 men. Roman frowned, unable to hide his disappointment. He asked back with a hint of sarcasm in his voice, as if to confirm that the scrap metal before him was really what Hendrik was offering. Roman's straightforward question did not faze Hendrik. He just sneered and affirmed it was true, then continued to show his uncooperative attitude by saying that if Roman was not satisfied, he could leave immediately. Unmoved by the challenge, Roman stepped closer, holding a sword from the scrap pile, his eyes never leaving Hendrik, and gently called his name in a calm tone, as if to start a more serious conversation. Roman swung the sword in his hand, then sarcastically remarked that the Dmitri iron quality everyone praised was probably just baseless exaggeration. His eyes lit up sharply as he bluntly questioned Hendrik about the real value of these weapons. That frankness made Hendrik pause for a moment. Roman's question, whether this was the best a master smith like him could provide, was like a direct blow to the professional pride Hendrik had always maintained. Hendrik's anger exploded. He loudly asserted that Dmitri iron quality was the best in Cairo, and could not forgive someone who had never sweated by the forge daring to insult their effort and pride like that. The fury reached its peak. Hendrik's face turned bright red and his eyes blazed. He shouted loudly, as if this was not just a personal reaction but the voice of all Dmitri blacksmiths offended by Roman's words. Master Hendrik erupted in anger, stating that if not for Baron Romero, he wouldn't bother caring about Roman. He mentioned Rodwell, Roman's younger brother, who had worked hard under his supervision for years to prove himself worthy of inheriting the family. In contrast, he criticized Roman for living recklessly, wandering the streets, indulging in lust, and wasting his life. Hendrik's tone sharpened further as he compared Roman to a pile of scrap metal lying scattered on the ground. With a contemptuous look, he did not hesitate to declare that Roman was useless trash, unworthy of rescue, and the greatest disappointment of the Dmitri family. Not stopping there, Hendrik continued attacking Roman for being dependent and incompetent. He emphasized that although Roman was the eldest son of the Dmitri family, he had never done anything useful on his own. According to him, Roman's helplessness was not because he didn't want to, but because he simply could not do anything. Faced with Hendrik's harsh words, Roman only sighed softly and thought, "Here we go again." However, this time he did not remain silent. With calm eyes, Roman spoke up, showing understanding of Hendrik's anger but also preparing to rebut with sharp reasoning. Roman raised the sword high under the sunlight, pointing out that the blade had dulled simply from sun exposure, revealing the poor quality of the steel. He asserted that this sword clearly was not forged with the proper technique and strength Hendrik often boasted about, and was likely the product of an inexperienced smith. Roman did not hesitate to declare that such a product could not be considered Dmitri steel. He faced Hendrik directly, saying even he could not deny this fact. According to Roman, instead of taking responsibility for poor craftsmanship, Hendrik was trying to blame others. The bitter truth made Hendrik so angry he trembled. He could only utter, "You," with a shocked look, unable to believe that someone once despised like Roman could now confront him with such sharp logic. In that tense moment, Roman gently called Master Hendrik's name and swung his sword. The swift movement cut through the air at an astonishing speed, as if to prove what he had just said with action rather than words. Roman presented a simulated combat scenario. He said that if a poorly forged sword like that was taken to the battlefield, it would fail to defeat the enemy and cause his own soldiers to die. A dull blade does not cut cleanly, causing the warrior to lose advantage and ultimately pay with his life. Roman concluded with a bitter image, a warrior who did his best to survive but was betrayed by the very weapon in his hand. He did not hesitate to take responsibility himself, calling himself a worthless lord for handing over that useless sword, thereby igniting a change in how Hendrik viewed him. Roman calmly stepped forward while Master Hendrik roared in anger, thinking he was deliberately provoking. But instead of reacting, Roman bent down to pick up a chainmail armor lying on the ground and asked bluntly, "Why do we need to wear armor in battle?" A question full of implication, opening his argument. Roman raised the chainmail armor, his eyes sharp. He explained that as long as the armor could block one attack, its value far exceeded any material worth. He emphasized that even one moment of protection could be the difference between life and death on the battlefield. He continued analyzing as he dropped the armor to the ground. If a commander provided poor-quality armor to soldiers, it was no different than pushing them to their deaths, betraying the trust of those willing to sacrifice for the mission. Roman looked coldly at the chainmail at his feet, pointing out a painful truth. Soldiers placed their trust in that dense chainmail to save their lives. But instead of protection, careless forging had turned it into a deadly trap. With a tone sharp as a blade, Roman described the terrible consequences. Armor torn apart, enemies piercing through, guts spilling from weak links. Faced with such harsh but truthful words, Master Hendrik angrily shouted, refusing to be insulted like that. Roman asked decisively, as if trying to awaken Hendrik's reason. He admitted he had never cared about steel forging before, but precisely because of that, he understood why Hendrik was so furious when criticized now. Under the deep night sky, Roman told himself he fully understood Hendrik's feelings, pride, disappointment, and silent sacrifices. However, the truth remained the truth, and it was time it was acknowledged. Not letting his words hang in the air, Roman drew his sword and stabbed straight into the armor on the ground. The strong gesture was not meant to harm, but served as undeniable proof of what he had just said. The armor could not withstand a simple stab. Roman fixed a serious gaze on Hendrik. If he had not discovered this poor batch of armor, his loyal soldiers would have taken them to the battlefield, unaware they were marching to their deaths. Roman concluded that this was not just a personal matter or professional pride. It was a matter of survival for 30 people, a responsibility Hendrik was deliberately ignoring. He bluntly questioned, as a top blacksmith representing Dmitri, how could Hendrik proudly view himself? Roman spoke sternly facing Hendrik, pointing out the serious consequences of personal hatred, that innocent soldiers could have died because of that selfishness. Hendrik stammered an excuse, but Roman silenced him with a cold verdict. Intentions no longer mattered, only consequences did. Roman emphasized that he came with his father's endorsement, but received poor-quality forged goods. He began to question Hendrik's loyalty. With cold eyes, Roman bluntly asked, was Hendrik's action an act of defiance against the orders of Lord Dmitri himself? In the dim light of the forge, Roman approached Hendrik, his tone decisive yet calm. He emphasized that personal conflicts should not endanger the lives of innocent people. Hendrik tried to justify himself, but Roman quickly interrupted. He coldly asserted that intentions no longer mattered when the consequences could lead to the death of comrades. Roman continued to specify the task assigned to him, the requirement to produce weapons and armor supported by his father, Count Romero. But in return, he only received substandard products. With a sharp gaze, Roman bluntly asked, was Hendrik's action an act of defiance against his father's orders, the ruler of this land? Roman further affirmed that he understood Hendrik did not intend to rebel, but failing to provide standard equipment was an act of disobedience, a form of insubordination. Roman's voice became firm. He stressed that this was not a personal request, but a direct order from the Lord, demanding the finest products to protect the land. Darkness enveloped, and Roman's sharp thoughts echoed. If subordinates cross the boundaries of power, order will collapse. Hierarchy is essential to maintain stability. Roman showed no leniency. Whether loyalists or trusted allies, anyone who breaks the boundaries must pay the price. Discipline cannot be taken lightly. Roman looked Hendrik straight in the eye, his expression stern. He reiterated the question, was his action truly defying his father's orders? Hendrik hurriedly denied it, while a blacksmith nearby interjected. Roman held his ground, demanding a clear explanation. Why did they give him that pile of useless weapons? Dmitri glared coldly straight ahead, his purple eyes full of pressure making everyone around too afraid to move. A loud shout of "Stop!" shattered the tense atmosphere coming from the old blacksmith, the head of the forge. The old smith immediately yelled loudly, ordering a halt, causing the assistant smiths to startle and quickly step back, not daring to advance further. Amid the tense silence, the old blacksmith bowed his head, sighed heavily, and apologized, showing regret for his actions. In memory, a young man was slapped hard and fell to the ground. The man standing before him shouted angrily, not believing he could forge a sword himself. Still angry, he continued to threaten, forcing him to discard the sword he had just made, and declared he would be kicked out if he repeated it. The forge door slammed shut, and the shout, "You fool!" echoed in the suppressed anger of the young smith. The young man grumbled, tidying up while complaining about a master who always gave orders without teaching and often resorted to beating. While still complaining, a sudden shout startled him. Someone was loudly questioning the forge's way of doing business. At the same time, someone offered a coin, confessing that this money was not enough to buy a good sword, but his eyes were full of determination. The desperate blonde young man raised his only coin, begging the blacksmith to sell him a sword. Though knowing the money was too little, he promised to pay 10 times more in the future. For him now, health and alertness were everything, and a weapon was the only condition for him to make a living. The blacksmith frowned and refused, rejecting the plea. He angrily told him to get lost if he intended to beg like a pauper. The young man still tried to hold on to his last hope, hopping for help just once because he had a family to care for. A fierce shout came again from the blacksmith. "Get out!" The coldness in his eyes made the young man hesitate. A figure standing nearby silently witnessed the entire conversation, his face thoughtful. With no words left to say, the young man trudged away, his silent back fatting along the trail surrounded by forest. His heavy footsteps blended with the bright blue sky, contrasting with his gloomy mood. Just when it seemed all doors had closed, a sudden voice called from behind, "Hey, you there!" The blond young man stopped, turning to see someone running toward him, holding a sword. Startled by the call, the young man asked in surprise, "What?" Before he could understand, the other approached with a determined look. The young blacksmith reached out and handed him the sword. The blond young man was stunned. "Hey, are you giving this to me?" In his hand was a real sword. The light reflecting off the blade affirmed its priceless value. The blacksmith gently explained that he had overheard the entire previous conversation. So, if the young man truly needed the sword, he could take it. Despite having only one coin, that kindness demanded nothing in return. The blacksmith smiled sincerely, saying he did not need money. The sword was originally meant to be discarded. The only thing he wished was that the swords he forged could help someone in life. The blond young man gripped the sword lightly, his eyes sparkling with gratitude. He smiled brightly, choked with emotion. "Thank you very much." In that moment, under the radiant sunlight, kindness truly ignited a new hope. The young man bowed in appreciation, tearfully expressing heartfelt thanks. Faced with unexpected kindness, he could not hide the emotion and gratitude in his voice. In that moment, he felt renewed hope to start his life anew. The young blacksmith scratched his head and smiled softly at the sincere thanks. He said nothing, only letting out a slight "heh," as if feeling relief in helping someone desperate. However, when night fell and unease crept in, the blacksmith's face showed shock. His eyes stared into emptiness, sensing that something wrong had happened to that young man. The premonition was correct. The young man lay motionless in a pool of blood, the faint light from his body gradually fading. The land that once witnessed the beginning of a dream now became the place where life ended. In his final moment, the young man's eyes opened wide with regret and fear. Death came too suddenly, leaving no time for him to do anything for his family as promised. A strange hand clamped tightly over the blacksmith's mouth, silencing him. In the darkness, someone was watching and suppressing the truth, extinguishing any chance to speak out. The shout, "Useless," rang out in the crowded place. The blacksmith was pushed down amid whispers and contemptuous looks from those around. No one stood by him, only shame and isolation remained. He ran through the rain, gasping amid whispers behind him. Outsiders sighed with pity, saying the boy had died while guarding the market. No one knew the truth, and no one wanted to know. The blacksmith bowed his head, his eyes bloodshot with pain. If only that sword hadn't cracked when he fought, that thought echoed in his mind like an unending, tormenting sentence. Amid whispers and endless gossip, he knelt before the crowd. What about his wife and children? Sharp whispers cut through his mind like knives. He could no longer bear it. After the unjust death of the young soldier, Hendrik carried endless remorse. He blamed himself for giving the faulty sword that indirectly killed him, a wound in his heart that would never heal. Hendrik clenched his fists, recalling that moment as a vow. Since that day, he vowed never to repeat the same mistake. From a mistake born of kindness, he realized how harsh the consequences of soft-heartedness could be. In the forge, a middle-aged man with an angry face called out Hendrik's name. He, perhaps a senior or long-time colleague, harshly questioned Hendrik for acting on personal feelings, risking responsibility on an emotional decision. Faced with the criticism, Hendrik did not evade. He stood upright, calmly accepting all punishments. Though his apprentice apprentices anxiously called after him, he maintained the attitude of one bearing fault without blaming or excusing himself. The older man finally softened his tone. If Hendrik was truly remorseful, he would not pursue further. It was a cold forgiveness, but also encouragement for Hendrik to atone through practical actions rather than empty regrets. Roman, the young man once refused help by Hendrik, now faced him openly. He bore no resentment and even praised Hendrik's forging skills. From Roman's hand, a sword dropped as a reminder for the important dialogue ahead. Roman expressed his desire to equip weapons for 30 soldiers. He affirmed that he understood Hendrik's past actions were not malicious but emotional outbursts. However, he emphasized that such mistakes should not happen a second time. Listening to Roman's words, Hendrik felt confused and deeply thoughtful. The young man before him was no longer the failure of the past, but a rational, calm soldier who cared for others. This surprised and impressed Hendrik. Roman's great transformation made Hendrik think inwardly. How could a person change so quickly? The once weak and emotional youth now radiated toughness and steadiness like a true leader. Hendrik sighed as if letting go of old pride. He finally admitted the young man before him was no longer the old Roman. He stood straight, sincerely apologized again, and pledged with all the pride of a blacksmith never to repeat past mistakes. Roman, with a gentle smile and rare calmness, promised to atone by forging the best quality weapons and armor Dmitri had ever produced, as a heartfelt apology from the bottom of his heart. At Master Hendrik's firm command, the atmosphere in the forge quickly changed. The blacksmiths responded in unison and returned to their workstations as if all previous discord had never existed. The forge blazed fiercely, signaling the start of a determined crafting process where steel was heated red-hot to forge weapons bearing great responsibility. Amid the blazing fire, the steady sound of hammer strikes echoed non-stop. The blacksmiths sweated and worked together under Hendrik's serious leadership, who had regained his spirit and focused fully on the newly given order. A sudden voice rang out amid the clashing metal, recalling a shocking truth. Roman had once stolen Master Hendrik's sword. The question burst forth in surprise like a cold wind blowing through the heated forge space. An assistant smith recalled the old memory that Roman had been so drunk he couldn't remember what he had done. Contrary to the tense atmosphere, Roman just stood silently, unable to deny but also unable to recall. The smith continued recounting details of the incident 3 years ago. Roman, cut off from his father's allowance, sneaked into the forge and sold the precious sword to a shady merchant for some cash. The sword Roman stole was no ordinary sword. It was the masterpiece Master Hendrik had spent his lifetime perfecting. The image of the shining sword cut into the pride of those who witnessed it. The process of crafting that sword was described in detail. 6 months to design the blueprint, 3 months to forge every line. Yet, in a moment of recklessness, it was sold cheaply like a worthless item, a pain too deep for words. The smith looked at Roman with heavy eyes, concluding that the nobleman would never understand the feeling of having one's masterpiece stolen and devalued. Roman remained silent, not arguing, only bowing his head to accept that harsh truth. Roman's past had truly crossed the line, leaving a stain that could not be easily erased. Stepping out of the forge, he seemed to carry the weight of old mistakes on his shoulders, a legacy he now had to face through his own transformation. The call Roman Dmitri rang out like a bell reminding him of the responsibility that name bore. It was not just a call but an acknowledgement that he had been and was walking a completely different path than before. Master Hendrik's gaze followed Roman with a mix of caution and concern. The old blacksmith, though not fully trusting yet, could not deny the clear change in the young man he once underestimated. Roman stopped, silently facing Hendrik. He did not justify himself, only gently admitted his fault. In response, Hendrik frankly stated that forgiveness had not yet come, and his heart was still burdened by the past wound Roman had left. With a serious expression, Hendrik emphasized that the heart of the Dmitri family was the craft of forging. If Roman truly wanted to be recognized as a new man, it had to come from action, from creating a work with his own hands, even if just an ordinary sword. Roman did not shy away from the challenge. With a confident smile, he pledged that the time would not be far off. That determination was living proof of the changes he was striving to affirm every day. After the conversation, Roman calmly left, leaving behind the forge now bustling with activity. He promised to return when the batch of weapons and armor was completed, a promise both a request and a milestone for their new cooperation. The heavy wooden door creaked as Roman entered. Light from outside flooded in, highlighting the interior, quiet, rustic, yet filled with familiar memories, once tied to an important chapter in his journey of growth. Roman looked around the room, his eyes softening with mixed nostalgia. It had been a long time since he last returned to this place, where countless sweat and blood had been shed during relentless training days. Before Roman lay the neatly arranged room just as he had instructed. Every item, every forging tool seemed to remain in its old place, as if the room itself silently awaited its owner's return. Roman quietly observed the forge room, feeling reassured that everything was prepared. On the walls, pliers, hammers, and forging tools were in their proper places, reflecting the pale yellow light from the stone walls. He whispered in thought, all necessary tools to begin were here. Standing before the ancient forge, Roman took a deep breath. The light shining on it made the forge emit a sacred glow. He knew the important moment had come, the moment to begin a process of atonement and prove himself through real action. The fire flared up in the forge, engulfing the space in a brilliant orange hue. Roman softly whispered, "Let's begin." In his heart, memories of Murim resurfaced, a place where youth and decisive choices shaped the man he was today. Roman recalled the harsh days in the Black Demon sect. There were no rules about succession, so each passing day was a survival battle between him and his blood brothers. In his memory, he most clearly remembered the one who targeted him, his 11th brother, Baek Changhyun. The sudden assassination attempt by Changhyun nearly took Roman's life. In the intense battle, both were evenly matched, and a small mistake from either could have meant death. But the harsh truth was that the sword Roman made himself could not withstand his opponent's strength. Amid the blinding light and howling wind, Roman's sword, his first pride, shattered under Changhyun's strike. Roman's eyes reflected disappointment mixed with anger as he realized his own limits in that life-or-death moment. Changhyun, with fiery red eyes behind his steel mask, charged like lightning. Each slash carried undeniable murderous intent. He showed no hesitation, no mercy, determined to kill Roman to eliminate a rival. The scene flashed through the eyes of the two opponents, Changhyun's eyes full of killing intent, while Roman, though surprised, remained calm. They stared at each other as if already knowing the outcome was only seconds away. A flash of light cut through the night, strong and sharp. The sound of a stab echoed like a fateful judgment. The final attack was launched, precise, lethal, and unavoidable. The blood-stained sword appeared in the darkness, evidence of a life-or-death battle that had come to an end. Although the fallen person was not revealed, the outcome of the clash was deeply etched in Roman's mind, and it was the reason that drove him to restart his own sword-forging journey. The brutal memory surged back as Roman stood silently in the dark with his bloodied, broken sword beside him. After delivering the fatal blow to Changhyun's face with that very blade, he realized the bitter truth. A warrior like him needed a weapon that could not break, a blade strong enough to match his extraordinary physical power. From that moment, Roman decided to be different from all his siblings in the family. He would not rely on others' weapons. He went to the forge himself, learning every step to craft a sword. Each time he entered the battlefield, he created a new sword perfectly suited to his physique and fighting style. His journey was a long series of hundreds of battles, with a new sword born each year. And throughout that process, by the 39th sword, Roman forged the masterpiece of his life, the demon god blade. It was not just a weapon, but a priceless treasure, tempered from blood, sweat, and years of relentless training. Now in the present, amid the blazing heat of the forge, Roman, bare-chested and focused, continued that work. The clang of hammer strikes rang like a fateful melody, each blow a vow for the future. His sharp purple eyes shone with undying determination. Roman knew exactly what awaited ahead. To face the approaching battle and begin a new chapter in life, he needed a worthy sword, and now was the moment to forge the blade for his new life.